Good morning, everybody. Just give a couple minutes for everybody to join, but wanted to say good morning and thank you for taking the time to join us today on our continued wealth management webinar series here. As many of you may know, this is our second webinar hosting in the last 6 weeks. We plan on continuing to host these events going forward every 6 weeks or so with a different friend and resource and acumen of the firm. So as many of you know, I am Jim Haley. I'm the CEO of Dividend Assets Capital and head of our private client group as well. And today, our speaker with us today and a friend of the firm and a resource of the firm is Tim Belber with Alchemy. So before I officially get into Tim's background, I just want to spend a minute. I've had some questions from some clients asking us, why, as an investment firm, we are moving down the path of doing these webinar series. And the reason really is twofold: is yes, we are an investment firm, and yes, many of you understand that we do a really good job with the dividend growth strategy. But our private client group, over the next 12 to 18 months, will be continuing to move into the direction of a private wealth practice. And the reason being is many of our clients have come to us asking us for help with many areas of their financial lives outside of just their investments. So, I don't think a lot of folks realize the background and the experience we do have in this offer, helping address the wealth management needs of clients. But Tim today fits in nicely with that. As I tell many clients here, there's only really 4 things you can do with your wealth. It's grow, manage, protect, and transfer. But what always seems to be missing is the coordinated delivery of that with experts like Tim, with other clients, advisors, with other acumen to actually coordinate that delivery of the right resources and the right acumen to meet those unique needs. So that's why we're holding these webinar series as we continue to move forward. So let me pivot here and introduce Tim Belber. Tim he's fantastic. We've gotten a chance to know Tim over the last probably year and a half to 2 years. He's done some great insight and some good work with clients, not only here in the Low Country, but across the country. Tim has 40 years of experience working with successful families and individuals on how to do value-based planning around their assets. So his resume is deep. He's written several articles for the Wall Street Journal, as well as other periodicals. He's written the book, The Middle Way, which is outstanding. If you haven't had a chance to pick that up, you can, or we can make sure you get a copy. But it's all been driven around how to create a vision for a family's financial future and how to conduct a more ethical and more meaningful approach to financial planning and estate planning. So his background is very solid here. So again, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. I mean, he's a member of the Legacy Wealth Coaching Network. He's a founding member and collaborator of Family Flourishing, a think tank that focuses on multi-generational families. He's an adjunct professor in graduate estate planning at the American College. He's the chancellor at the Purposeful Planning Institute, and he holds the Charles DeMurrell Estate Planning Professional Chair since 2020. So very fortunate to have you here today and look forward to sharing your presentation with us today. So Tim, I'll turn it over to you. Clients, you will have the opportunity to answer some questions. If you have anything that comes in, please do. And I'd be more than happy to do that. So Tim, with that, I'll kind of turn it over to you and let you shed some light on where we're going today as well.
Great. Well, thanks, Jim. I don't know if you want to use the Q&A box or not, or
Yep, I have that here. So
okay, great. And just a quick FYI, Jim mentioned my book. It's actually available now for download on my website for free, so you can get an e-copy of it right off the website, which is www.thealchemiagroup.com. So if you want to take a look at it, it's there for the taking. So when Jim asked me to talk today, it's about the approach that I have found to be most effective for helping families begin the planning process and feel better when it's done than they did when that started, which has always been one of my goals. So I'm going to talk a little bit about um, how I go about working with folks, and then then we're going to talk about how that actually would play out in the scenario where you have a trust or multiple trusts, which is what I see as being very common. But to start off with, I want to reframe the definition of wealth. Now, most of the time, when you hear the word wealth, you tend to think of something financial, or maybe it's a real estate asset. But a picture that pops into your head is based on the financial side of things. Well, the word wealth is actually from two Old English, well, a word and a suffix. The word weal, which means well-being, and the suffix th, which means a state of. So a family of wealth is actually a family that's in a state of well-being. And now well-being means a whole lot more than just having a lot of financial assets. I have found over the years that there really are, and some people will call them the five capitals of family wealth, the five containers of family wealth. I tend to like the word pillars, but that's this year. Maybe next it'll be something different. But I call it the five pillars of family wealth. And these are the things that actually help a family stay together and function as a very effective, thriving, flourishing group. The first pillar is human health and development. That's where you are attending to the individual health, both physical, emotional, and mental. Because if you think about it, if you have a family where all the individuals or most of the individuals are not physically, emotionally, and mentally healthy, you're going to have a hard time being successful doing much of anything. The second pillar is how does the family capitalize on all the experiences and learning that they have? Because that's where you learn. Like I commonly will say when we do a family meeting now, we'll have maybe some 16, 17 year olds in the world. They know what the world is like through the eyes of a 16-year-old, and I have no clue what that is. But that's really important information to share and somehow for the family to archive. So we spend a lot of time trying to capture, I'll call it family wisdom or experiences across generations as part of supporting this idea of there being multiple pillars of family wealth. The third pillar are the relationships. And this is a skill set. Because if you don't have good relationships within the family, or the family members don't have good relationships at work, at school, with their friends, with the causes they feel important about or feel are important to them, things aren't going to work out well. So there's a whole skill set there to help support that. That's listening skills, conflict management skills. There's actually a skill to forgiveness, communication, appreciation, gratitude. I mean, these are all things that families come together to learn about and start practicing that create this basic glue around a family staying together. Then you have one way of phrasing this is I've heard it referred to as the spiritual pillar, but it's basically what does it mean to be a member of this family? What are our timeless principles and traditions that really matter to us that we all agree upon? And we build things out like a family compact. What's their legacy of impact going to be for that family across generations? And then finally, there's the financial assets. And there's skill sets in there too, budgeting, ownership, governance. How do you deal with emotions around the financial assets? But the really important thing about this, when I talk about a family well-being, is the first four, unless you're healthy in those four, that last one, those financial assets are going to disappear. If you imagine how hard it is for you to function when you have a bad case of the flu, and think about working, thinking about attending to your financial matters, think about doing much anything other than trying to sleep and get better. Well, that's what I compare to if you're trying to be a successful, purposeful family around your financial assets, but you're not attending to these other four. You basically have the flu and you're trying to do things that probably are going to become a real struggle for you to
Right.
attend to.
And Tim, I really appreciate you sharing this because what I hear time and time again and from families, regardless of their success, is there seems to be this preconceived notion that this only applies to like wealthy families and ultra wealthy families and folks that are and I think it's been lost that these five pillars apply to family success and family wealth. If you have $1 million to if you have $1 billion, there's a mindset that should be shared in this regarding of how much wealth a family has. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that for a minute. Would you concur with that, or is it or
No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, uh, the collaboration of family flourishing that Jim mentioned earlier, that was a group of us got together and decided that we needed a place where, as family counselors, advisors, whatever, could come together and talk about these issues that exist outside of legal, tax, and financial matters. And one of the things, one of our founding principles was if what we're talking about only applies to ultra high net worth or high net worth families, then it's about the money, not the people. So every one of these can actually go down all the way to an individual level. If you think about yourself, how are you doing in your physical, emotional, and mental health? How are you learning from your experiences? How are your relationships? What do you feel like it really means to be you? And what's the impact that you want to have as part of your legacy? Then you have your financial resources, which can then be deployed at whatever level to help in all these areas. But the basic four apply, I believe, to any family, no matter what their level of wealth is. So when you think about the planning process, oh, and hey, Jim, if you get questions in the Q&A box that you think it's worth stopping for, don't hesitate. I always say more of you and less of me is a good thing.
yeah,
So,
yeah, I'll make sure as we go forward, and I'll have some questions for you as well if we don't have anything from our audience.
okay. This is the process that I've used for probably the last 25 years. I have to give attribution to my late friend Scott Fithian, who quote really actually taught me this, but it's been invaluable. So we start off with the idea that we have a planning horizon. And so that would be a horizontal axis. And then there's a vertical axis that divides planning into what I call the four quadrants. The top quadrant is why are we doing this in the first place? It's about the people, the communities, and causes that we care about. We're not doing this to avoid taxes. But I'll tell you a little heresy, and as a tax attorney, it's a big heresy. The idea of eliminating or reducing your estate taxes is not a goal. All that is another strategy. It's a strategy to put more financial resources into a family system. Then the real why is what do we do with these things now that we've done this? If we've implemented a strategy that gives us greater directional control over a level of our financial resources, what is the direction we want to go with that?
That's
So
right.
this is the why. It's very, very important to forget everything about financial resources and those types of things when you're working on the why. Because after you work on the why, then you can drop down to how are we going to do this? Um, this is where the thousands of strategies and tools that all our advisors have, and these tools include things that a lot of people don't think about, like family meetings, like life coaches, like all the variety of things that can help the people in the community and the causes you care about be impacted in a positive way by what you do. So, how do we actually do this? Well, it starts out with the number one quadrant is discover and assess. And we're going to talk a little bit more in detail. But this is not just you handing over to me or whoever, your personal balance sheet and your documents and saying, what do I need to do with this?
Right.
As we're going to see, it's a lot more than that.
Right. And this is the part that I, as we were getting ready for today and really going through and talking, this is the part that really I was hoping you would get to and spend some time on. Because what I have found in my career, and I have found when working with the families I've worked with over the years, is this part is often so automated that it's almost to a science. I've had clients and colleagues where I have said, two meetings and documents is not discovery. It's not discovery. So
Right.
you move forward and you work through this. This is the most exciting part of the presentation for me. And I hope our audience hears about what it means to truly go through the discovery process.
Well, we'll get into each one of the quadrants in a minute. Once you've done appropriate discovery, then you're able to actually have a filter. It's almost like you created a blueprint, and now how are we going to bring this to life? And that's where we can use that filter to sift through all of these strategies and tools that reside down here and come up with some creative solutions, not just to solve problems, but creative solutions that are based on looking ahead and the vision that came out of discovery. After that, then there's intentional implementation. And this is a lot more than just signing documents. This is about being intentional in how you bring all this work that you've done to life. Then, to me, discovery is important. Right next to that is relevance. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but it's not, is this plan still compliant? If there's been no changes in the tax laws, why do we need to make a change? Well, the question really is this relevant to who our family is today and the direction we're going versus who we were 5 years ago and the direction we thought we were going in then? The relevance question is in my mind, one of the single most important ones you can do when you're thinking about what you've put into place.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about discovery.
Right. And your relevance too. I mean, that can happen at any time. Family member passes, grandchild's born, business is sold. Okay. There's that relevance that can happen at any moment. And that's where it comes into real life too, Tim.
And relevance is I've had a personal mission for several years now to change the whole idea of annual reviews or legal reviews and to call them all relevance, because relevance goes to the family, compliance goes to the technical work, and it's more about the family than it is the technical work. So discovery at its core, it's about purpose, not just money. Traditional estate planning typically begins with financial assessments, asset inventories, tax mitigation strategies, the kind of stuff that even a lawyer like me has a hard time staying awake for. But what it really is, it should go to your values, priorities, and vision so that the plans you create reflect who you are and where you want to go. And these are completely different than someone saying, well, the exemption for estate is going to go away or get reduced at the end of this year, so we've got to act on it. Well, maybe yes and maybe no. You hear a lot of lip service to don't let the tax tail wag the dog, but I still see a lot of dogs being wagged by their tails these days because nobody really asks these questions. And it's part of the problem is there's no training for this. I didn't learn any of this in night law school. This all came about because I wanted to have a different definition of my career and not be a professional necessary evil who talks only about death and dying. I wanted more, and I was fortunate to meet two people who helped me discover, so to speak, that there is more. Discovery is also collaborative and reflective. Like Jim said, two meetings and docs. Well, it's really hard to have the right kind of conversations built around the time for you to reflect on what the questions are. If you go into the professional's office, they pull out their checklist, they ask you questions that they expect answers to immediately, it's going to be tough to really be thoughtful in what you're doing. So it's important that the conversation that occurs between the advisors and the clients, where you're given time to reflect on your life experiences, what's going on within your family, what really matters to you. Advisors, in my mind, should be facilitators, not necessarily leaders.
Exactly right. It's funny you say that because I hear it all the time. I'm the quarterback of this relationship. I'm in charge of this relationship. I'm the professional in this relationship, and I'm the estate professional in this relationship. But at the end of the day, the facilitation between those advisors, okay, I've tried to have conversations with folks and clients to say, your advisor should be leaving the ego at the door and sitting down and sitting there representing and sitting there being able to be collaborative and facilitate between each other. Because at the end of the day, I don't think what most clients really realize is sometimes those advisors have different pieces of that family's picture. And to get that, put that together properly takes the collaboration and the reflective process. I may know something, you may know something completely different for that family that they might not have shared with me or shared with you, vice versa. And how can you advise as a team if you're not all able there to be sit there and collaborate and have a reflective process? So,
Right, and you're so right about that. And the best engagements, I guess is the best way to define it, I'm involved in is the advisors regularly get together and just share what their interactions have been with the client family, your families, over the last quarter. And with Zoom, it's so easy. It's not you don't have to try and figure out, okay, I can make this work. You're in one city, I'm in another. How are we going to pull this together? And the last point to what you said, Jim, I don't like the word quarterback. I think a facilitator is just a role that somebody agrees to take on, so nobody else has to take it on that's part of the group.
that's right.
So,
Right. But even that part, Tim, in my career, in my experience, sometimes the client is the one who has designated this person is the facilitator for our family. I think you called it the family generational architect in some of your work, but it's the family will designate. It could be a me, it could be you, it could be the CPA, it could be who, but the hired help, but the person has the hired advisor has had been sometimes the families appoint that person as well. Yeah.
exactly, and generally, in the best ones, they will appoint them, and they'll do it thoughtfully because they know that person is the one who talks to them about things beyond just their technical skills.
That's right.
Um, and discovery is also about defining a legacy beyond wealth transfer transition. And this whole idea of is it a transfer or transition is another whole conversation. But the outcome of good discovery is what's the impact that you want to have beyond your financial inheritance. And this includes things like how do you feel about philanthropy? How's the family going to, governance is not my favorite word, but it's basically how's the family going to make decisions together? And how are you going to be responsible for heir development? There's an old saying that we spend a lot of time preparing assets um, to be inherited, but we spend minimal time preparing heirs to inherit them.
Right.
And that's a key component that discovery highlights, and then the good advisor can help you design a way to prepare your heirs in a thoughtful, meaningful, respectful, collaborative way. And there's no lack of tools out there for doing that.
Right.
So
I actually have a question here from a client that says, how long should this discovery process take?
I'll give you the good lawyer's answer to that. It depends. Uh, now, all kidding aside, you, I've had discovery take 3 months. It depends on how how thoughtful and how much time you have to spend thinking on this. And it also frankly, it depends a lot on the tools that your advisor uses for discovery.
Right. Right.
Because you can't, their conversations are really important, but the conversations are generally based on things that you will write down and bring to the meetings with the advisor.
Right. I have another
Discovery can
question
be done
here.
in 2 months.
That's right.
But there's one other interesting thing too, that on that graphic, there's no natural, you move from discovery to creative solutions and you close the door on discovery. A lot of times you're going to float back and forth. I had one client, we were designing a special type of trust for them. And as the document was coming together, he kept thinking, well, I didn't think about this being important in this thing, but I think I want to include this. So he was going through his own path of rediscovery as he was thinking about what was being put in. Now, this is someone who doesn't like legal documents, but it took 7 drafts for us to get something that he loved. And I
Wow.
mean it, he loved. He loved it so much. He's a member of a group called Tiger 21, which is a business owner's think tank. I put together a PowerPoint. He also doesn't like PowerPoint. I put together a PowerPoint presentation for him to present to Tiger 21 as something that their other members should think about doing. So that discovery process doesn't necessarily end and then solutions thing. You can float back and forth.
Right.
One point that I should make too, when you're doing a plan, there is a level of triage that has to happen at the beginning. If there is something that is just such a blatant problem that could be a landmine tomorrow, that will have to be addressed. So you may jump ahead, but you've got to make sure that everybody's in a safe place, both in terms of asset protection and taxes and personally, before you can start doing thoughtful discovery. So there is that triage up front. We're not ignoring immediate threats to the family's success.
I have another question, Tim, that has come in. It's a great question. It says, how do you break the ice to start a meaningful family discussion for discovery with a family that is close but very diverse in their lifestyles? Should the daughter-in-laws be included? And what about adult grandchildren? So I guess it's like I look at this question as who should be involved with this discovery process?
Well, again, I have to say it kind of depends on the individual family situation. Um, the initial discovery process, and part of the discovery process involves learning about the family tree. I mean, that's one of the things during the first meeting that I actually draw on a piece of paper is a family tree because I want to know about everybody who's in this ecosystem that I'm now going to become involved with. Um, once once the basic discovery is completed, then that will tell you, well, who else do I need to talk to? Um, and this is how I'd like to be introduced to them. And for a lot of these families, and it may be true for yours, I don't know. Each one's a little bit different, but I have some families that are um, they've got a business that's 50 years old, or they can trace the current state of affairs for them today to something that happened 50 years ago. And they will base it on that, saying that now, and this is being addressed to the next generation, both bloodline and in-laws. They'll communicate with them that we were stakeholders to help get us this far. Now all of us are stakeholders for what happens in the future for you and your children, and we're going to we've engaged somebody to help us think about this and get all our input on it. The first family meeting that I do when we introduce these is all about just the 5 pillars, and we'll touch on a little bit of education on each one. But it's more about getting comfortable with the idea of meeting. Now, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole on meetings just for a minute here. There's a woman named Priya Parker who I was, through a whole bunch of lucky things, got to interview. And she wrote a book about why we gather. And that has become my blueprint for when I do family meetings. Her basic premise is the day someone accepts your invitation for a meeting, that's when the meeting actually begins. And with family meetings, the last thing I want any family members walking in there saying to themselves, why are we doing this? I wonder what's going to happen today. I don't want that at all. So we spend a lot of time planning family meetings where for the 6 weeks leading up to it, every week, all the family members are getting something about, hey, think about this because you may want to contribute some thoughts on this. So they all feel equally respected. Um, Last thing I'll say about this so we can move on. It's bringing the next generation into um, the quote family wealth conversation is also a process because it's not as simple as here's our balance sheet, look what we have. Is nothing but a formula for disaster unless you have a very unique individual. The next generation needs to learn about how to think about the role of financial assets within the family system. Too many families in the past have cast the family's financial assets as the lead actor in the family play when it should merely be a minor supporting part. But that takes a change in mindset and an understanding and an agreement within the family that this is what's really important to us. I lied. Last thing on this. I definitely think you should include all the in-laws um, because they're going to, you may bring your children in and not their spouses, but your children are going to tell their spouse what went on in that meeting. And if they aren't, then there's a level of distrust there that shouldn't be going on. So why not let them hear it directly and because they are going to be both of them together, the parents of your grandchildren. So the more everybody can be on the same wavelength, sending the same message, the better it is.
Yeah.
Two of my longest term families also, if you're engaged, then your fiance is allowed to come into allowed.
Yeah. I actually have a real life example of that with a family that in my previous life where the daughter's fiance wasn't able to adjust to the family values and the family scenario and the work the family was doing, and the actual marriage never made it to the altar because the work it was too overwhelming. It was too and they included that the fiance in, and it didn't make it to the family altar. It didn't make it to the altar.
Ooh, yeah, that's pretty well. You know what? I don't know anything else about the situation, but if that was enough, then it's probably a good thing it didn't.
Right, right. But anyways, let's keep
So,
moving.
like on discovery, it's an evolving conversation, and when I talked a little bit about relevance, and we'll get to that, but it's just recognition that no matter what, life circumstances are going to change. Even if nothing else, everybody's going to be 5 years older in 5 years, and they're going to have 5 years more worth of experiences. So it becomes important to look at those. So, what is the real secret sauce? That is the questions that get addressed. As part of follow up to this, Jim will be sharing with everybody what I call my baker's dozens of questions. And some of them are interesting. They're all questions that I've used and love because they get conversations going. And it helps people start to think not only about their own situation, but what they really want out of their plan. So um, use them, bring them to your next planning meeting with whoever's doing your planning. So I'd like to talk about some of these questions and how they can be incorporated into the work that we're doing.
Yes.
Okay. The next quadrant is that creative solution where we take what Discovery defined as the purpose of wealth and then we turn it into something that's real. I think it was William James, the philosopher, who's a pragmatist. He said, a good idea is just that until it actually benefits another human being. So if you can't do something with these conversations, and you've had some really fun conversations, but now this is where it becomes for advisors to be able to do something. As example, if philanthropy and feeling good about what you're doing in the world is a key value, then a creative solution should involve some way of creating a charitable pipeline into the world. If family governance is important, if because of the structure of the family's assets, it's really important that the family be able to work together, then some creative solutions could include, let's set up a family council and advisory board and some structured heir development programs. This is where you use what comes out of discovery and make it into meaningful structures. But these structures are not there because they're a good idea. They're there because they support what matters to the family. So let's take a look at this and the creative design of a trust, which is a cornerstone vehicle for many, many family wealth plans. I have something I call the trust chassis. I call it this because every single trust is built on this. Every one. If you have a pension trust at work, that's built on this same chassis. You see all kinds of names that people slap on trust. Well, all they're doing is talking about one function that that particular trust is serving, but they're all built on this simple chassis. And when you understand the chassis, then you can start creating expectations on your advisors as to how they're going to fill them out. So the trust starts out with someone that would be you and you'll hear described as the grantor, the funder, the trustor, the settlor. I mean, we put all kinds of odd sounding words, but we're just talking about you. And you in turn give something, could be money, could be business interest, could be a vacation home, something that we would call the corpus of the trust to somebody else who happen to be the trustees. But you're not really giving it to the trustees, even though they have legal ownership of it. What you're doing is you're giving it to them with the direction to hold those things for the benefit of some other persons, which is generally this is where the beneficiaries are.
Right.
Every trust is built on this same chassis. So why does this matter? Well, what matters is for the benefit of. The for the benefit of is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the trustee gets guidance to carry out what matters to you. Too often, if you take two trust documents and you rip off the cover page and you rip off the signature page, you have no idea whose trust either one of them are because it's all boilerplate. There hasn't been a lot of discussion around what is it you really want the trust to do.
Right. That's right. And
I'm a big believer in distribution purpose rather than amount.
right. And I don't think a lot of clients have been educated to the fact that that trust to the benefit of and that structure, you can be very creative in there and how you make sure that a trustee is being instructed for the benefit of. You can be very creative in there.
You can and um, on the downside, that leads to long documents.
Right.
On the plus side, that leads to long documents because they can become incredibly thoughtful. If you think about if you've ever read a trust document, they generally start out with some whereas or now to for or something like that. Imagine your grandchild reading a trust document that starts out, well, we have put this together for a lot of legal and tax reasons. We really hope you, our children and grandchildren, view this as an act of love that will do nothing but enhance your lives.
Right.
That simple sentence at the beginning of a trust document, then it can be a very, very traditional document after that, that will change the visceral response that the
Right.
beneficiaries have to that document.
You're right. Because a lot of times, Tim, as you know, in practice, these documents get done and they get put in a file, and it's 10 years later they get opened, or 5 years later they get opened, and nobody remembers why this was created in the first place.
Right. So these are some of the things that I've seen incorporated into trust documents. A safety net. I always want to make sure that my descendants have a safe place to live, food to eat, access to medical care, including mental health professionals. That's a guidance statement that a trustee can look at. Now, that doesn't mean you have to give them money. You can rent them an apartment and pay the rent. You can buy the house and let them live in the house.
Right.
You can do all kinds of things without handing out money, but you're carrying out this idea that I never want to think about any of my descendants living on the street if they don't want to be living on the street. Opportunity funds, charitable impact funds, all kinds of all these things can be built into the document. And let me take a step back too. Not not all professionals are comfortable incorporating these kind of things directly into their trust document. So we've come up with two things that we do. One is a guidance document for the trustee, where the creator of the trust spells out what their intentions are in all the various areas. And for example, we want you, when you're thinking about an educational distribution, we want you to think broadly about this. We want you to think about travel as education. And I'm not wordsmithing this real well right now, but I think that's the point. We also create a guidance document for the beneficiaries as to how they should be thinking about this trust and what it should mean to them and what the creators wanted it to mean to them. And lastly, a lot of times we'll do letters of intention. Kind of the same thing, but a little more personable because it's addressed directly to each one of the beneficiaries and addressed to the trustees.
Right.
So just because you have an old trust and you can't be changed for whatever reason doesn't mean you can't create an intention statement or a guidance document. So don't feel like you're trapped with that. There's a lot of other ways to change trust these days, but there are some that they're set in stone. Then you can always go outside and say, well, these were my intentions, and I would like you to consider them as you act as trustee. So after you've designed and we've created the quote creative solution, now there's this intentional implementation. And to me, that doesn't just mean signing documents. What you have to do is figure out how can my family, which is our children, our grandchildren, maybe even beyond, depending on how long the plan is designed to last, live in this plan.
Right.
Now, it's an interesting question because, well, discovery ensures intentional implementation is not just about financial efficiency and document signing, but also about honoring the family's legacy. Implementation, putting this stuff into play, means educating heirs and stakeholders so they understand the purpose of the structures that are being created. All kinds of things you implement, trusts, investment portfolios, gifting strategies, they all should be aligned with the values that were covered in discovery.
Right.
Because you don't want family financial wealth to become a source of conflict.
And your advisors that we've talked about earlier, the coordination of that, those folks, the professional advisors right there you pulled up, they have to be on the same page, implementing and making sure who's doing what. I've told clients in my career, it's like the huddle breaks and everybody lines up and they know exactly the role they're playing, who's implementing what. I always use the football analogies because I played football and I love football, but it's the same concept. It's like you break, you go to the line of scrimmage, everybody knows their role. Everybody knows who's blocking who, everybody knows what's got to be done. And that team of network is that's why it's so important that we're having this collaboration in here.
You're absolutely right. And here's the question. One of your professionals recommends something. It could be anything. You have some form of a statement, whether it's bullet points, an actual document written out of the things that came out of your discovery process and the things you want to see happen for you and for your family and for the causes you care about. The question to ask on any recommendation is, how does this recommendation support these things? And if the answer is only based on, well, it saves you income taxes, then it needs to go back to the drawing board and say, well, I need something that's where I can feel and know it's supporting what mattered to me so much.
Yeah, right. We've had a number of clients here in our experience here, right here in our own backyard, where the work is being done and the handoff isn't being finished to updating beneficiaries, retitling accounts, sharing what the intent was around that trust document, sharing what the intent with the folks who are actually responsible for managing the investment portfolio for that trust, where that handoff isn't being completed, to say, okay, we have these assets now, we have this trust document, but what's the real purpose and the intent here? And why are, help us understand why we're retitling this, and even from the standpoint of where the beneficiary should look like on the other assets that are here as well. So that coordination is key. I'll let you go forward with this. We don't, if there's any other questions, please keep them coming.
So staying with our trust example, one of the big things that gets overlooked so many times when you're implementing a trust are the human issues. First off, you're forcing people into relationships. You are now in a relationship with whoever the trustee is as grantor trustee. You are now in a relationship with the beneficiaries as grantor beneficiaries. The beneficiaries are now in a new relationship, a couple of them, as beneficiary and trustee. And the beneficiaries are in relationships with each other. So there has to be some discussion about those. Who's going to be responsible for compliance? I had years ago, I had a client call me and says, "Hey, Tim, we're putting this trust together, and my neighbor said he'll be my trustee if I'll be his."
Right.
And I had to pause because my initial response would not have been a good one.
Right.
So what we actually talked through, my first question to him was, how well does your neighbor know your son and your grandchildren? Oh, he's never met them. That's not a good person to be the trustee, because now a lot of people think the beneficiary is subservient to the trustee. In some respects, they are. But in another respect, the trustee is subservient to the beneficiary, because the trustee has one job: to act exclusively in the best interest of the beneficiaries. And that's where their fiduciary duty lies. And that's what an educated beneficiary will call a trustee out on.
That's exactly right. We do have a question. We have a quick question here. Do the guidance documents need to be notarized to be considered valid?
Absolutely not. I mean, these are not legal documents. The guidance documents are documents that are prepared by you just so everybody knows what you were thinking about. You can handwrite them out if you want and put them in an envelope, but just make sure that everybody knows where to find them, or deliver them currently. But they're totally same thing with a letter of intentions. It's just a document, because where this does relate back to the legal side of things, when there's ever a question around something with a trust, one of the questions, and hopefully it never gets into court, that they'll ask is, well, what was the grantor's intent? And these documents can be good evidence of intent. So they have a little bit of standing, but they're more to help trustees. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of trustees over the years. I have never met one that wouldn't have loved to have gotten good guidance on the intentions that their grantors have when they set up that trust. As simple a thing as, what does education mean? If my grandson wants to go through, and I'm not picking on anybody, a Tony Robbins course, does that qualify as education? And too often documents are vague on that. And now the grandson wants a distribution. Trustee's looking at this, and he's got other beneficiaries who aren't doing this, and is he distributing properly or not?
Right.
So a little help on the grantor's intent.
That's right. I had a client in my career who thought health, education, maintenance, and support was an allowance to update her wardrobe seasonally. Was
I'm sorry. That's oh, um, but there's also a lot of compliance that has to go on, and you want to be sure that you're sending that the right things are being sent out to the beneficiaries, and that you're filing the tax returns correctly, that you're issuing the K-1s that have to come out for distributions and the ink. So the compliance side of things just begs for a professional trustee as a co-trustee with no distribution powers. You're also creating shared ownership. Now, you have to say, well, I'm worth $50 million, and if we do it right, each one of my children will have a trust worth 25 million. Well, yes and no. The $50 million is 30 million is made up of shares in the closely held business that you want to see continued for them. So now they jointly own an asset.
right,
Have they ever owned anything together before that they had to make decisions about?
right,
These are some of the things that need to be discussed as part of this implementation. This is something that I'm a big believer in, but I totally understand if a client wants to do something else. I think everybody should have equal opportunity under the document. But equal opportunity doesn't mean equal access. To take advantage of the opportunity means you have to comply with what are the steps necessary to take advantage of that opportunity. The most common example is investing in a business for a beneficiary. Well, if you're thoughtful and that's really important, the trust document or the guidance document for the trustee will lay out these are the things that I'd like to see. A business plan where the trust is empowered to engage a professional to help the beneficiary draw up a business plan. Outside financing for 20 or 30% of what's going to go into it so that the business plan has been vetted by an independent financial organization like a bank or some other source of funds. Those are the kind of things that instead of someone coming and saying, "Hey, I want to invest in my buddy's cannabis store that he's going to open in Colorado," no, you're going to have to prove to us that this is a beneficial to you
right,
and a real business opportunity.
right. That's right. So,
Um, and then it's also how are you going to transition from one generation to the next? And again, this is another whole topic, but it's as the next generation increases in age and becomes a senior generation, how are you going to transition your governance of the trust to them? And then the last thing is, and this is a hot topic with a lot of my clients right now, this idea that when someone turns 21, now you may have kicked the can down the road about talking to them about the trust, but at 21 in many states they become what's called a qualified beneficiary.
right,
In many states, qualified beneficiaries, the trustee is legally required to send them information regularly on the trust.
right.
So again, this is something, how are we going to deal with that transition from being a minor beneficiary to being a quote adult
That's right. That's
and
right.
a qualified beneficiary?
So we're got about 5 minutes left, Tim. So I want to, if we you kind of going to wrap up on a couple high points that you really want to stress as we go through. And if there's any other questions, please let them come. But we
Okay.
keep this.
I mentioned relevance.
Yeah,
Again, this is one of the things I hope is a big takeaway for you is that you need to be, when you're reviewing your plans with anybody, is that the R word come up, the relevance review. Talking about life events, family growth, external factors, and so on. And air education involvement should be an active and evolving process because as being a lifelong learner includes being a lifelong learner about how to be a good family member.
and this is one of the ones that I think a lot of folks struggle with, and how do they bring in that family to educate? But it all goes back up to creating the values. And if you create your values first in that framework first, you can come back here. It makes education and involvement so much easier, so much easier.
And then again, the importance of an independent trustee and a trust protector. I won't spend a lot of time on either of them, but the trust protector is important for flexibility going forward for a trust that's going to last a long time. And the independent trustee provides the administrative services that no individual wants to be responsible for.
That's right. That's right. And you mentioned the word co-trustee. I don't think a lot of families realize that you can have the co-trustee there to serve as the administrator and also be, I've actually had clients where we said the co-trustee can be the bad cop. If there's a tough conversation that has to be had, you have the independent trustee there that can be that bad cop with that family. So you're not disrupting the family dynamic and the family relationship over the trustee work.
Yeah. Do we have any more questions?
We don't at this time, but
Okay, well,
we're bumping quite about 5 minutes left. So
okay, well, I'll just to wrap up then, you can see how this planning process with a good facilitator can really drive some great results, not just initially, but almost importantly over time. Because what happens is as you do the relevance review, you're actually doing a rediscovery and assessment and thinking, do we need to change anything? And how do we bring them into play? And this recognizing that what we're talking about is a very dynamic process will make all the difference in the world.
right,
Because these kind of plans are not about death and dying. These kind of plans are about investing in the future of your family and the family's flourishing and success over generations.
right. I don't think many families realize too statistically the generational wealth is just about deleted by the third generation. So this work is very important, and and admittingly, I've had some frustrations, and I shared it quite a bit. It's not two meetings and documents. It's a real thoughtful process that has to be with a collaborated group. So we don't have any other questions, but I'm hoping everybody on the call today, this was meaningful, it was insightful. It potentially gave you a different way to think about some things and gave you something you're going to stew on for a little bit. And ironically and candidly, Tim sits right here in the Low Country. So we have this great resource and this great gentleman and acumen right here in our own backyards. And and we will make sure all of you get out his the Baker dozen questions that'll come out to you as well. And if anybody has any questions, thoughts, or wants to have a conversation with Tim, you have the information here. This session was recorded, so we will be editing this, making sure everything is buttoned up, and we will be resending this out to all our clients as well as posting this on our website. So, Tim, I thank you. I look forward to continuing our working relationship. More to come. Stay tuned. Our firm and Tim, we're going to be thinking through a way to have Tim actually be involved with DAC for meet the needs of our clients. So, and I'm excited about that as well. So, thank you all for joining us. Well, we got one more question. Any suggested books? Any suggested books?
Well, not to do shameless self-promotion, but I would suggest mine as a good entry because mine was not written for other advisors. It was written for and based on my experiences over the years with the clients. There is a book called The Cycle of the Gift. It's by Hartley Goldstone and James E. Hughes, both of them are good friends of mine. You don't need to read the whole book. A lot of these books, you read the first 100 or so pages, and then the rest is kind of going through it in a little bit granular detail. But it will help you think differently about what it means to make an actual gift to someone, and typically it's targeted at your children.
Right.
Other than that, those are the two that I recommend the most.
Okay.
I mean, there's another book by James Hughes called Family Wealth, Keeping It in the Family, which is a very good book, but it's very philosophical. Oops, I'm sorry. I should have shut that off. Okay. But those are the books that I would recommend.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. Tim, it's always a pleasure. Everybody have a great rest of the afternoon, and our next session will actually be we're scheduling that now. It will be with Policy and Taxation Group, and that'll be in May. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.